A New Reality is Operation Mindcrime's brand new album and is the third and final chapter in this trilogy of albums that started all the way back in 2012 with The Key and also Resurrection. I quite enjoyed The Key. I thought it was a pretty solid album, lots of great tracks on that one. I didn't mind Resurrection. I found it to be a little bit of a dull listen with really only a handful of tracks that I enjoyed. The album opens with a track called A Headlong Jump, which is an instrumental and really a song of two halves. It really starts with more of a psychedelic, almost orchestral type of intro, which I found really interesting. And then the second half moves into more of a hard rock track. Wake Me Up is the second track on this album, and it features a really cool riff, a really energy-driven track, very up-tempo, and it features a type of energy that I found was really lacking in the second half of this album. And there's also some really cool, interesting guitar layering going on in this one. Under Control features a really cool rock bluesy type of groove, which I found really interesting, and it's also really cool to hear Geoff Tate's upper higher register on this particular track that is sadly quite absent from this album. The caliber of musicians on this album is quite high. I mean, Geoff really knows how to pick them. He knows how to work with the best of the best. So I was somewhat disappointed in the performances. They're okay for the most part, but there's definitely nothing that's outstanding there. And I actually found that there are some playing mistakes that feature on some of the tracks, like for instance Wake Me Up. The drum track around the 1.5 minute marks does have some very odd fills and drum lines going on there that I think really needed a second or third take. As the old saying goes, you know, musicians should always be about serving the song, but here I even feel that because this is a trilogy and part of a narrative that's being told over these the course of these albums, I actually feel it's more of a case of these guys really step back to serve the narrative. It really pains me to talk about Geoff Tate in this review, guys, because his voice is just not the powerhouse instrument it once was. I feel that his albums with his previous band Queensryche are iconic. Throughout the 80s and 90s, he was really a pioneer throughout that progressive rock metal genre. And for me, listening to that work back there was so inspiring, and he was really fired up, you could tell. But on this album, that Geoff Tate is long gone. You know, he's basically steering clear of some of those higher notes that he's really well known for, which is a wise choice. You know, he has definitely lost some of that higher register that he's well known for. However, there is a lack of conviction to these vocal performances in order to really sell this narrative that Geoff is really inspired to tell. It's not just his range, but also his use of vibrato. You can actually tell that his vibrato range is getting much wider now, and he's losing more control over some of those notes. And unfortunately, most of these vocal performances are not that great. And if you really dig in and listen carefully to this album, you'll actually find that he spends quite a bit of time narrating rather than actually singing. This album was produced by Kelly Gray and also the man Geoff Tate himself, and I like the direction that they went in on this album. It's a very ambitious mix, very spacious, very wide, a lot of reverb, delay, and there's also some really, really cool synth arrangements on here as well. Really cool sound bites that are pushed towards the back of the mix as well, so I think you'll have a really good time if you actually listen to this album on headphones. You'll actually find some of these sound bites quite jarring, and it will actually catch you by surprise. So they're the cool things that I liked about the mix. The things that I didn't like too much is, while the synth arrangements were actually quite interesting, I find that they did overshadow other instruments that are trying desperately to find their way within the song. And so some parts of the album you actually find that the bass guitar is being masked by other things. So I found it very inaudible at some points, which is not a cool thing. And sadly, Geoff Tate's voice, which we've already talked about in this review, is also laid up by some very obvious auto-tune. The issue I had here, guys, is the attention given to the narrative is not really given to the songs. The songs just aren't there, guys, and I really didn't find anything that was too memorable. I enjoyed listening to My Eyes, and I thought Under Control had some really cool ideas in itself, but they're not outstanding tracks. I mean, there's no bad tracks on here or anything. I just found it's just really dull and unmemorable, and it's just not something that I expect going into an album that features Geoff Tate on it. Guys, I want good songs, you know. That's what it's all about. You can have all the bells and whistles, but if you don't have the songs, there's really no point. And most of these songs just kind of drag on, and they don't really feel like they have a cohesive or a tie or connective tissue to it. It just kind of feels like a cut and paste of different sections of just a few ideas that really aren't very well explored. I get the sense Geoff Tate's ready to move on. You know, he's mentioned in some recent interviews that this is the last album he's going to do in this trilogy of Operation Mindcrime albums. So it'll be really interesting to see what he does next. But given his storytelling talents, I feel that he could be a great author or perhaps a screenwriter. Something to do with writing I feel he could really excel in. For me, guys, look, Geoff will always be an amazing artist, and his work with Queensryche, as I said, it's untouchable. He's a pioneer on that front. I'd really only recommend this album to die-hard fans of Geoff Tate or die-hard fans of this particular series of albums that have been going on. But for everybody else, there's better albums to spend your money on, guys. I'm going to give Operation Mindcrime, A New Reality, a C. Guys, thanks heaps for watching as always. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course comment down below. I'd love to hear what your favourite Queensryche album is. Until next time, guys, don't forget, support the artists, buy the music. Rock on.